The roar of center court wasn't for the world number one. It was a deafening anthem for an underdog from the Philippines. In a moment that defied all logic and rankings, Elena Rybakina, the undisputed queen of power tennis, was left shattered, her Wimbledon dream brutally extinguished by a star who was barely a teenager just a few years ago. This was not a victory. It was a tennis revolution, a seismic upset that has left the world gasping for air. Witness the rise of Alex Eala, the girl who didn't just believe in miracles. She created one, leaving a trail of destruction and heartbreak in her wake. This is the story of the day the future of tennis was rewritten in front of our very eyes. The air on center court was thick with an almost unbearable tension, a stark contrast to the usual sunny optimism of a Wimbledon afternoon. On one side stood Elena Rybakina, the world number one, a force of nature whose ground strokes are less tennis shots and more sonic booms. She was the heavy favorite, the unshakable titan expected to waltz through the draw. But across the net stood a different kind of storm. Alex Eala, a name whispered among tennis purists, was no longer a secret. She was a revelation, playing with a freedom and ferocity that seemed to paralyze the Belarusian powerhouse. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with the realization that something extraordinary was unfolding. The scoreboard, a cruel and indifferent oracle, showed numbers that seemed to defy the laws of physics and probability. Rybakina, visibly frustrated, was uncharacteristically erratic, her huge swings finding only the net or the open air. Her powerful serve, usually a weapon of mass destruction, became a liability, often failing to find the box when she needed it most. Eala, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of precision, returning Rybakina's heat with interest, absorbing the power and redirecting it with pinpoint accuracy. The giant was not just being challenged, she was being systematically dismantled. Each point won by the young Filipino was a nail in the coffin of Rybakina's championship aspirations. The crowd, initially a neutral audience, had become a partisan choir for the underdog, their cheers a powerful, palpable force that seemed to lift Eala's every step. The body language of Rybakina told the story better than any commentary ever could. Her shoulders slumped, her face a mask of disbelief. This was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The expectation of victory had turned into the bitter taste of defeat, and it was being fed to her by a girl who was playing with the heart of a lion and the poise of a veteran. The very foundation of the tennis world order was trembling, and all eyes were glued to the scene of the impending demolition. While Rybakina's world was collapsing, Alex Eala's was ascending into a stratosphere of sporting legend. This wasn't a case of a lucky break or a momentary flash of brilliance. This was the culmination of years of relentless dedication, sacrifice, and a dream that burned brighter than the English sun. Eala's story is one of a prodigious talent nurtured far from the traditional tennis factories, a testament to the global nature of the modern game. At just 21 years old, she represents the new wave of fearless youth, unburdened by the weight of expectation that crushes so many seasoned pros. Her game is a beautiful tapestry woven with threads of Spanish grit and the grace of her Filipino heritage. Her victory here was built on a masterclass of tactical intelligence. She didn't try to out-hit Rybakina, she outthought her. Her serve was a surgeon's tool, placing the ball precisely to set up devastating forehands. Her return of serve was a psychological weapon, consistently putting pressure on Rybakina's weaker second delivery. But more than the technical prowess, it was her unshakable mental fortitude that truly stole the show. With the pressure of the biggest stage in the world on her shoulders, Eala displayed a composure that was almost eerie. She seemed to be playing a different sport, one where the stakes weren't a Grand Slam title but a simple game of chess. Every fist pump, every determined glare was a statement of intent. She was not just there to participate. She was there to conquer. The victory is a monumental moment not just for her, but for the Philippines and for Asian tennis as a whole. She becomes a symbol of hope and possibility, proving that with enough belief, the impossible becomes inevitable. The torch wasn't being passed. It was being snatched with both hands by a young woman who has just announced to the world that a new queen is in town, and she is here to stay. The match was a war of attrition, a brutal exchange of ground strokes that pushed both athletes to their physical and mental limits. The pivotal moment, the one that will be replayed for decades, arrived in the second set. Sabalenka, having lost the first set in a stunning tiebreak, was in full beast mode, unleashing a torrent of winners to break Eala early. It looked like the champion had finally woken up and order was being restored. She held a commanding lead, and the momentum had shifted entirely. The partisan crowd held its breath, fearing the fairy tale was over. Sabalenka, smelling blood, stepped up to the line to serve for the set. It was her moment to roar, to reassert her dominance, and to push the match to a decider. But then, something miraculous happened. Eala, down love 30, unleashed a blistering cross-court forehand pass that left Sabalenka rooted to the spot. It was a shot of pure audacity, a microcosm of her entire performance. The look on Sabalenka's face shifted from frustration to a dawning horror. She had thrown everything at her opponent, and the young girl had simply absorbed it and thrown it back with interest. Eala broke back, the crowd erupting in a cacophony of cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the All England club. The break of serve was a psychological blow from which Sabalenka never fully recovered. Her unforced errors, which had been a steady trickle, turned into a flood. The calm, collected warrior had been replaced by a woman fighting her own demons on the court. Eala, sensing the fragility in her opponent, pounced. She began to dictate play, moving the world number one around the court like a puppet on a string. The speed, the precision, and the sheer courage on display were breathtaking. In that single game, the narrative of the match changed forever. It was no longer about the big upset. It was about a changing of the guard. The giant didn't just stumble. She was pushed, and the person doing the pushing was refusing to stop. It was a turning point that sent a shockwave of energy into Eala's game and a wave of despair through Sabalenka's camp. As the final point was played, a forehand error from Sabalenka that sailed long, the scene was one of pure, unadulterated emotion. Sabalenka's reaction was not of anger, but of devastating shock. She stood frozen at the net, her gaze fixed somewhere in the middle distance, her eyes wide with a disbelief that bordered on a trauma. The force that had propelled her to the top of the rankings had failed her at the most crucial moment, and she was left to confront the unsettling reality of her sudden obsolescence in the tournament. She managed a polite handshake, but the gesture felt robotic, a mere formality masking the profound devastation within. There was no smile, no gracious wave to the crowd. The world number one had been beaten, and beaten badly, on the sport's grandest stage, and the wounds were deep and visible. It was a stark portrait of a champion at her lowest, a moment of vulnerability that resonated with anyone who has ever faced a colossal and unexpected failure. Across the net, the story was a stark contrast. Alex Eala was a picture of cathartic joy. She dropped to her knees, her hands covering her face as years of hard work and sacrifice came pouring out. The screams that tore from her throat were not just of relief, but of pure, unbridled ecstasy. She had done it. The impossible dream had become a reality. The emotion was raw and contagious as she rose to embrace her team, a tidal wave of Filipino pride washing over the court. The tears were flowing freely, for her family, for her country. This was the moment the child's dream met the champion's reality. The contrast between the two women was the most compelling image of the tournament. One in the throes of a nightmare, the other living a fantasy. It was a powerful reminder that in sport, for every winner, there must be a loser, and the depth of that despair is often only matched by the height of the victor's ecstasy. The aftershocks of this monumental upset are still rippling through the tennis world, and the landscape of the sport may never be the same. For Aryna Sabalenka, this defeat is more than just a loss on the board. It is a crisis of identity. The invincible aura has a crack. She will have to return to the drawing board to reassess her game and confront the mental fragility that was so brutally exposed. The loss will be a scar, but how she heals from it will define the rest of her career. Will she come back stronger, more determined, or will this be the moment her reign began to crumble? For Alex Eala, The world is now her oyster. This victory catapults her from a promising prospect to a genuine Grand Slam threat. She has announced herself as a major player, and the expectations will now shift. The target is on her back. The question is, can she handle the pressure of being the hunted? With her game and, more importantly, her mind, the answer seems to be a resounding yes. This is a watershed moment for tennis, a story that transcends the sport. It's a global narrative of hope, resilience, and the beautiful unpredictability of human endeavor. The women's game has a new, compelling protagonist, and the future is suddenly bright with endless possibilities. Eala's path through the tournament is now the most anticipated story of the fortnight. She carries not just her own dream, but the hopes of a nation. The fairy tale is not over. It is just beginning. As the sun sets on center court, the legacy of this match is already being written. It is a reminder that in tennis, as in life, the most powerful stories are not the ones we expect, but the ones that shock us, move us, and inspire us to believe in the impossible. If you enjoyed this latest tennis update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to World Zone right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.